Hello and welcome back to The Jump Show. This week we have a small weekend review followed by a weekend preview for you all. As always, I'm joined by Dan. How are you doing, Dan?
Very well, mate. Thank you very much. The nights are getting longer, it's getting colder, and yet for some reason, most people are talking about flat racing for this weekend. Absolutely baffling. But don't worry, we're going to bring it back straight to earth with some proper good old-fashioned jumps racing.
We definitely are. And Jake, how are you?
Yeah, all good. Off to Exeter tomorrow for the Haldon Gold Cup. So exciting times, onwards and upwards.
All right, let's get stuck right into it anyway. We'll start off with a quick review of the Mayor's Hurdle at Wetherby. So Proshima absolutely destroyed the field here. He ran out a 10-length winner. I suppose for me personally, I don't think we learned anything new about him. He beat Thomas Darby the same distance as the year before. In behind, you could certainly argue that lots of these were having their like a prep run for later down the line, and a rise of, I believe, 11 pounds. I think that's rather steep. Jake, I'm going to come to you first. How impressed were you with the run, and where do you think he could rank this season?
Yeah, a very impressive performance, but I think it's one of those targets that the Dans get on the yard of, identified as a race that he can go and win, and they've just primed him to the minute for it. He had a good prep in the Silver Trophy. They've turned up here, probably one of the only horses that could have won it, really. Thomas Darby, I think he was just prepping for the Newbury race next month, or at the end of this month even, that he won last year. So it makes sense just to have a run before that. 3 under 3.5, obviously he's going for the Coral Gold Cup, same as Oscar Elite. So those two had some, just plodded around and had some decent preps for that. And then Sporting John was the only real disappointment in the race, really. Obviously he went off favourite. Never really landed a blow, but Proshima was just, as I said, primed to the minute for this race and did his job.
It was a long time off the track for Sporting John, though, wasn't it? Most probably got some bigger targets down the line.
And Philip Hobbs have seemed to need the run as well, so I think you can excuse it.
Form.
Dan, do you have anything more to add on this race at all?
The first thing I'd say, we're firing on all cylinders today, because I think you said Proshima won the Mayor's Hurdle to introduce the race.
Did I call it? I meant Bet365. I meant Bet365 hurdle.
Sorry. I was hoping you'd come to me first, so I could have called that out sooner. But there we go. We'll all have a good laugh at that. We are on it today, aren't we? Not much more to say really about Proshima. I think anyone who watched our Chepstow review video, I did say he had a nice prep with this race in mind. Did it nicely. I say the horses in behind were all kind of types you couldn't really rely on to run a race for various reasons. I think he's still a progressive horse. I think Dan Skelton implied he's had a lot of niggly issues beforehand that he might just be starting to get over. And he's the kind of type, like, he needs relatively quick ground, so he's not going to be around in the depths of winter. But he'll pick up these kind of races, I think. I don't think this is necessarily it for him. He's a decent free miler in a division where there aren't many, who travels well and has a turn of foot. And those two attributes will stand in good stead for further races.
We'll move on to the Charlie Hall. Most probably got a bit more meat on the bones this race. Brave Man's Game cemented his King George credentials with a pretty cozy win over Eldorado Allen by 3 lengths. Dan, I'm going to head back to you. Is he your idea of the King George winner?
Not if Allaho goes. And it seems likely, to be honest. Look, it was a nice performance. I think we can all admire him for the horse in terms of his jumping, especially. And he's very much a pleasure to watch when he's in his pomp. And he was very much that the other day. But I don't think we learned much, really, when we break it down. I mean, he beat Eldorado Allen by just over 3 lengths, getting £3. I still come away with the same questions I had for much of last season, and that's what does he find when under pressure and when he's in a battle? I'm desperate to find out the answer to that. I remember when he beat Pat's Fancy in that Newbury handicap off a welterweight, he jumped the last 3 lengths ahead, was pushed out, asked for an effort, and finished 3 lengths ahead. Pretty much the same thing happened here, but he actually jumped the last further ahead than he finished at the line, despite, again, being driven out. It wasn't like he was necessarily being taken easy on either. He was probably being asked to extend, and he just doesn't seem to. So I just want to see what happens when he can't just cruise past horses on the bridle, pick it up and let the jumping almost take care of the rest. Now, he's not going to be able to do that. He's not going to be able to cruise past Allaho if they meet in the King George. That is just not going to happen. He won't get near him. He won't be travelling well enough to get near him. So for as much as I admire the performance, we obviously had a Hoy Seigneur's disappointment as well, which left a lot of questions about him as well. I think we come away with more questions than answers on all fronts for this race.
I thought he came in for sort of like unnecessary criticism, and you touched on a couple of points, mainly from people over the pond, though, if I'm honest with you. The way he didn't extend was one of them, which, as you say, has become like a common theme of his wins. I think a few people threw stones at him for the way like Sam Brown was finishing just behind him as well. I thought it was a pretty flawless performance. He jumped them silly, traveled like a train, especially on the second lap. And I didn't think he was completely driven out. And he most probably he was 90% fit, maybe even less than that. So I think he's going to improve plenty for the run. It is a question of if Allaho turns up, then he's most probably the most likely winner of the King George, and the market will reflect that. But yeah, providing Allaho doesn't turn up, I think he is the King George winner. Jake, do you have anything to say on this?
I guess I'll just touch on Ahoy Senor a bit then. I think you've covered Brayman's game. I think he just did what he had to do in the end because Ahoy Senor was so bitterly disappointing. The way that he jumped down the back the first time, it was so exuberant. It almost like scared you as a backer, like I was anyway, just that he would even get across them. Obviously he did it and he got across them really fast, which is fine, but you can't do that for a 3-mile race. And this time he couldn't even do it for 1.5 miles. Like running past the line for this out to the second circuit, he'd already been passed. And then at that point, he's been beaten. Like there's no way he's going to rally past them all and, take a lead again and go again. And I think what was even more disappointing is that Lucinda Russell's come out and said that there's no issue either. Like it's just that he was so fresh. I think that's what's disappointing. Like if he picked up an overreach with the way he was jumping down the back the first time, then it would make sense. But yeah. I think that's what ruined the race a little for me. But Brayman's game, as I said, just did what he had to do. I wouldn't be throwing stones either way in terms of what he's beaten and how he's beaten it. I think if he's up against Allaho, we all know that he's massively up against it. And if he's not, then he's had a perfect preparation where he's not had to, overexert himself for the King George. So yeah, it's, as you said, it's all hinges on Allaho really now, the King George.
I'm going to give you a quick little weekend eye catcher. I'm going to keep mine really brief. I'm literally going to give you the name and just urge everyone to go and watch the run back, and you'll see exactly what I'm seeing. Hurricane Bay, who ran in the opener at Wetherby, really gutsy performance in defeat, finishing second. Jake, who was your eye catcher or eye catchers?
Yeah, I'll just quickly touch on Before Midnight. I thought he ran well for third in the 2-mile handicap chase. He's been dropped £1 for that. He's going to go back for the race he won last year, only £2 higher. So depending on the entry, he might be a decent bet for that. But my main one is Ready Steady Bow for Lucinda Russell. So he was actually making his chase debut in a handicap chase over 2.5 miles at Ayr. And he ran up against Elvis Mail, who's now rated 142, and Marone, who's rated 130. So 2 proper decent handicap chasers. And he was only beaten 2.25 lengths in third. It was a really good run. He was only running off a mark of 113. So obviously he was getting a fair amount of weight, but he jumped really well. He finished 5 lengths clear of the fourth, who was a Gordon Elliott raider over from Ireland. And he's actually been only put up £1 for that run. So he's off a mark of 114 for his next run. I'm not expecting him to be a massive price, obviously, but it was a very good start to life over fences for him.
Dan, who was your weekend eye catcher?
So I'm going to cheat because I'm going to choose a
race and a horse, and they both ran last week. Which, I don't do things conventionally. We know this. So the race is the Novice Handicap Chase at Uttoxeter that was run last Friday over 2 miles at Thunder Rock one. I really like him. I think he's going to make a smashing chaser, especially over further. But I think that race is going to produce plenty of winners, the likes of Baracello, Deeper Blue in behind. Most of them went pretty well in that race. Time figure looks pretty good as well. So keep an eye on horses coming out of that. And the horse is Iker Grand Champ. And again, I'm kind of bottling this because he's already on my provisional list for next year's winless ones to watch, which kind of shows you the amount of faith I have in winning a race in the next 7 months. But bear with me, right? So he's Gary Moore horse having his first run for him. We know the market tends to speak volumes, and he was fairly weak in the market that day. He actually shaped pretty well for a long way, just tired late on. He was quite an expensive purchase as well when you go back. And I just think he's only a 4-year-old. He just looks a bit of a long-term prospect, really. He's related to some very useful chasers over in France. I think he's been given an opening mark 115, which isn't that generous based on his English form, just looking at that. But I think he'll be the type to come into his own maybe in a year's time. So just have him noted down in your tracker. It wouldn't be surprised me at all if he pops up at a decent price one of these days. So that's a massive cop out from me. Absolutely.
You're a joke, mate. You're an absolute
I know.
joke.
That's why you love me, though.
I do. We'll move on to the weekend preview, and we're going to start with the Friday race at Exeter, the Haldon Gold Cup, where the second season chasers are sort of heading the market here. You got Third Time Lucky and Warlord, who are very high up there. Jake, where's your money going?
Yeah, so it's only a 5-runner field, obviously, as we've kind of become accustomed to in these Grade 2 and Grade 1 races. But I mean, there's a decent field, obviously. You got Grenadine in there. I think he's running off a mark of 168, which is the same as he was last year, where he's beaten about 20 lengths. So I'm not saying that he can't win this, but it looks like it's just going to be another prep for Tingle Creek to me. I think somewhere it said online that he's a bit more forward, but I would still be happy to take him on, trying to give upwards of £15 to the rest of the field. So I think then you kind of get down to Third Time Lucky versus Warlord, really. And I just think that Warlord is the one for me. Third Time Lucky, he's got the question mark of stepping up to this extra, 2 mile, like basically 2 furlong trip. And he's also got to give £4 to Warlord. So that's enough to make, swing me into Warlord's favour anyway. That's before we remember that it's Third Time Lucky that we're talking about here. So yeah, Warlord,
still reliable.
I mean, exactly, yeah. But Warlord, yeah, he stays 2.5 miles, as you saw at Aintree. He would have finished closer to Miller's Bank in that Grade 1 if he hadn't made a mistake at the last. So he was beating 10 lengths, but we know he stays further than 2 miles. But I think dropping back to 2 miles will be fine, considering he won over that trip about 3 times last season. His run in the Arkle, where he's finished 4th behind Edwardstone, was good. He's got some really solid handicap form earlier in the season as well. I just think that this 2 mile, 2 furlong trip would just be his ideal trip. Like, it would just be perfect where he could stay a bit further, but also have the speed of a 2 miler as well. And obviously, at the weights, he's looking at getting £4 and £19 respectively from Grenadine and Third Time Lucky. I think he's got a great chance. And obviously, Joe Tizard is just absolutely flying along at the minute with the winners. So, yeah, I think that swings me enough into his favour, but I wouldn't be going massive. Obviously, it's a 5-runner race, and you've got 7-4 and 2-1, the first 2 in the market. So it's not exactly a massive betting heat.
Similar thought process to you. Grenadine with a prep towards the Tingle Creek. Dolos most probably isn't up to this standard, and also be looking for that race at Sandown next year. And Us and Them is like a 50-1 poke as well. So I wouldn't be opposed completely to playing like a reverse forecast, but I landed the opposite way. I landed on Third Time Lucky. I think he was the better of the 2 novices, despite like the one time they faced each other, Warlord beat him by a nose, but that clearly wasn't the best version of Third Time Lucky. The pair was stuffed 16 lengths by Edwardstone. Third Time Lucky stuck up a much better performance when facing Edwardstone. I believe on his next start, I think he's only beaten about 4 lengths. I suppose most people might bash the Scoutman form. He's currently operating at like a 10% win ratio. But this is a really nice pot to win for this time of year. And I think it's a good chance for Third Time Lucky to get a Grade 2. I think he's going to be ready for it. And he has been smashed in now. I think he's like 7-4. I think he's maybe 5-2 earlier on this week, which is a little bit disappointing. But I think he's going to win first time up. Dan, I know you didn't have a strong opinion, but would you be picking holes in which one?
Yeah, as you say, it wasn't
a race I had a strong opinion of. When it gets these kind of races, don't really do it for me from a betting perspective. But I did take a bit more of a look after you called me a bottle job earlier for saying I didn't have a strong opinion and wouldn't say anything. So I think out of spite, I actually ended up siding with Warlord instead. I just kind of came around to him a bit more. I think this is probably more an appropriate test, 2 mile 2. I think he's got a fairly similar profile to Eldorado Allen. I do think Warlord will stay much further in time as well. He's fairly relaxed sort for his races. Won on seasonal debut last year in a race that worked out very, very well. Yeah, I just, would I be having a bet in the race? No. If you gave me money that could only be used on the Haldon Gold Cup, it would go on Warlord.
All right, we'll move on to Saturday's action now, starting with the Badger Beers at Wincanton. I suppose the big story revolving around this is Frodon switching from the Grade 1 at Down Royal now into a handicap. All the talk on the build-up to the Down Royal race was that he's going to be fit for his life. So I suppose that's a big tick in his box. And it wouldn't be the first time Frodon's carried a massive weight to victory in a handicap. Dan, I'm going to head to you. Do you think Frodon has what it takes to win this race?
Yeah, and he's the way I'd be
playing this race, to be honest. I don't think it's a vintage race by any stretch. There's some decent horses in here, decent handicappers, horses from last year's race, which I think was a fairly weak renewal. But I think he's the fairly obvious one here for reasons you've already kind of alluded to. We know he's going to be ready for this. Like, if he's going to be fit for his life this week, and it doesn't matter if it's the Down Royal race or this race, he's going to be ready for it. And obviously, we look back to last year. I mean, in Down Royal, we beat Galvin, who'd already had a run that season. Nellarindo in third, Delta Work in fourth. I mean, it's pretty decent form when you break it down. The season before that, on his season reappearance, he won the handicap at the October meeting of 164. I mean, just being fresh and good ground is pretty key to him, and he's going to have both of those things here. Now, you can argue that his form declined during the course of last season, and ultimately it did, but I think there are excuses pretty much every time there. He set an unsustainable pace, or at least helped to set an unsustainable pace to the King George. Yeah, it was just, obviously everything came from rear when Tornado Flyer flew from the back, as most things did that day. Still finished a respectable fourth, though. Didn't exactly fade out completely. Then Bryony probably made an error going up the inside in the Irish Gold Cup, where everything else basically went wide. Whether it was a case of it just wasn't the right race for him, or that probably didn't help either. So I think you can forgive that run. And then he just couldn't get to the front in the Ultima. And you compare this race and the Ultima, it's two completely different kettle of fish. Like, there's just no real comparison in terms of the standard of handicaps, in my opinion. This is definitely a much weaker race. And I looked at the pace angles, and there aren't that many here. It's a smaller field, obviously, than the Ultima as well. So I think it shouldn't be too much of an issue for him to get to the front. And we know what he's like when he gets his own way. If he's still the horse that he was, like, he could swat these away quite easily. Obviously, you are taking a small chance. Obviously, age is catching up, but it's 4-1. I'll have a little play on that. I think that's reasonable enough, considering the class that he is, and I don't think the others in the lineup have that class.
Yeah, I liked the Frodon angle myself. I suppose the only thing I would add is that Nichols is someone who's targeted this race in recent years. And although this was an afterthought with Frodon, he's very much back down to a workable mark. He was a bit more of an each-way proposition in the middle of the week, but yeah, very happy to still play at about 4-1. Jake, you've got a different route. Who are you fancying here?
Yeah, I completely see the angle with Frodon, and if he was still that each way price, as you mentioned in the week, like 8-1, 6-1, whatever it was, then I probably would be happy to play it. I think just because he's now favourite, I kind of want to go elsewhere. But yeah, I completely agree. His last two runs fresh have just been extraordinary, and if he produces the same form, then obviously he should win this. And Brillo's the other one at the top of the market. I'm definitely happy to take him on. He's got more letters than numbers next to his form. So yeah, definitely happy to take that one on. I think if all was fair in love, then Captain Nord would be the one that I would be backing here. Honestly, like if we knew that he was definitely going to be 100% running into form here, then off a mark of 132, we know he can win off that type of mark. So he's had the exact same prep as he did this time last year. He was beaten, well beaten at Chepstow season opener with the pieces off. He's now got the cheap pieces back on for this run. And he's down to a mark that's £5 lower than he was last year when he went off joint favourite. He's only £3 higher than when he won that Kempton race in February as well on similar ground, where it was nice and quick. So if they're going to try with him, let's just put it bluntly, then I think that he is the one that could win this, getting all of that weight. He's carrying 10 stone too. Frodon's carrying 12 stone. Like if he can, deal with Frodon's, how Frodon travels, if he can travel up next to him, then he can definitely win this. Other than that, it is a bit of a traffy heat, really, isn't it? I don't think there's anything like a massive price that I was that keen on. And Potterman, I think he's placed in this race 3 times in a row now, and he's still off a higher mark. So yeah, not being given much.
He pulls up all wins. So even if he gets dropped like £2 and goes up 8.
It's just not the best strategy. I mean, Christian Williams would not have that.
No. You need to come 4th, 8th, 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 4th, and then win.
That's 6-4 foul. All right, we'll move over to the Aintree card for the Grand Sefton handicap. You're going to have to skip me out on this one, boss. I don't really have a strong opinion. I will go to you, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Sefton, right? A lot of these are trying
these fences for the first time. I think it's hard to have a massively strong opinion if you do fair play, but I kind of came down on a horse who hasn't seen these fences before, but is a fairly progressive type, and that's Cooper's Cross. I think in general is kind of excelled now. Now he's tackled fences. Obviously, resumed that progress with a really nice victory at Carlisle the other day on his seasonal reappearance. He kind of handled the softer conditions that day, which connections were a bit uncertain of as well, which I think is somewhat important given the national courses currently has some soft patches there. So it isn't going to be rattling quick like the likes of Wincanton might well be. He's a pretty sound jumper. Obviously, you don't really know how horses are going to take to these fences until they're there, but he looks the kind of type that will take to it fairly naturally. And given the post-race comments by connections, it seems like this has been the plan for a while. Yes, he's well out of the handicap, but honestly, for races like this, I'm really not too worried about that. I'm far more concerned about their profile and if they will take to the conditions of the race. The booking of Sean Bowen, obviously a massive plus given his exemplary record over the fences. Yard going pretty well. So, I mean, you could make a case for most of these, as you say, but I'm happy to take a chance on him at a decent enough price.
Jake, who do you fancy for the Grand Sefton?
Yeah, well, firstly, I just want to commiserate the lost in translation backers 20-1 into 11-2 and then not declared. That is
don't
tough.
commiserate. Why are you backing
lost in translation in 2022, nearly 2023?
If he was in this race, I'd have backed him.
Yeah,
I mean that says it all exactly. Like, I mean, Willow would have backed him for this. That's why you should never back him ever again.
Didn't you win a grade 2 last year?
He did, yeah.
Mm. And he took to these fences lovely.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, the national fences, he was jumped them brilliantly. He just didn't say the trip. But anyway, he's not in the race. The one that I like, if the ground stays as it is now, if not, dries out, which is looking likely. There's only a little bit of rain forecast for Saturday morning. Other than that, we're looking okay. So I think with the way that the ground is at the minute, it's good to soft the whole of the home straight, and it's just soft around like the back parts of the national course. So I'm going to be happy to chance Senior Citizen. I don't think he necessarily needs it quick or anything like that. It's just good to soft is fine. Any worse, it really hinders his chances. But he's completed this course and distance 4 times now. He finished 3rd in the 2021 Topham off 137, 2nd in this race last year off 139, and 8th in the Topham on his last start off 143. And his 2nd in that race last year was actually a really, really good run. He was only just beaten a length by Mac Totti, who obviously went on to win the Topham later that year, rated 145 now. But he's a horse who actually runs best fresh. So his record, if he's had a break of 161 days, so just an ordinary summer break, is 1-2-1-1. So he goes really well fresh, including last year where he won at Market Brazen en route to this race. So he won off a mark of 134. Beat Guy.
Yeah, there we go. Point proven.
Everyone beats Guy. Move on.
Let's not pick holes in that.
Let's pick holes.
Yeah, so he won that. He came back to the national fences. As I said, he only got beaten a length. He's only £1 higher this year because he was dropped £3 for his last run. And as long as the ground doesn't deteriorate any further, I think he's got a great chance. If it were to turn really, really testing, then I will give a mention to Geskilly. For Oliver Greenall. He actually won a listed chase at Oitoy on his last start. And the second has actually won a listed handicap chase at Oitoy again since. Yep. So that form looks good. I think he wants it proper soft ground. And the other thing about him is he won 2 Fox Hunters back in April. So potentially they're thinking of going for the Aintree Fox Hunters this year. And this is just like a getting his eye in over the national fences. If not, he could also come back for the Beecher next month over 3 Mile 2 Furlong, which will probably be right up his street on a bit softer ground. But he's definitely a very interesting horse, and I see how he runs here for future targets.
Yeah, absolutely. He is the interesting one. No, I just couldn't put my finger on him. So happy to leave him alone for a punting perspective. But yeah, no surprise if he's out the back, jumping around well and staying on. He will. No surprise there at all.
We'll move on to what would most probably be the feature of the day, the Ladbrokes Champion Chase, where Galvin looks to right the wrongs of last year's 2nd. Obviously, this doesn't look as hot a renewal. At least I don't think it looks as hot a renewal. You've got Conflated, Kenboy, Environment, and Beacon Edge. I just don't really like the look of the race, if I'm honest with you, because Galvin would be the obvious pick. They've always said he wants quicker ground, though, and it doesn't look like it's going to be that this year. Conflated, most probably likely to need the run. Kenbot and Violin are just washed out at this point. Just not good at all. Jake, could you turn my head somewhere else?
No, I honestly really wanted to back Conflated in this, but there's the fact that Galvin's had that run and won it well, it just completely puts me off backing against him. I'm not obviously going to be backing Galvin, but he would be my pick to win the race. Yeah, like his form last season is good enough to win this. And as I said, he's very fit now after that run the other day, which I thought he'd need that run, and he won that race very well. So yeah, I think Galvin just wins, unfortunately. As much as conflated, I think is a nice horse, and obviously his Irish Gold Cup win was very good. I think it will come together for him again at some point this season, but
yeah,
it doesn't look like today.
I agree. I was thinking along the same lines, because I think the 3 miles is what really suits him. He run really well at Aintree as well. Dan, any strong opinions on this at all?
Not strong. I just have a note on the ground. So the chase track is significantly quicker than the rest of the track. So it's soft, yielding to soft on the chase track. Some about 6 millimeters predicted before Saturday or on Saturday morning. But then you look at the hurdle on the bumper track, it's soft, heavy in places. So there is a bit of a notable going difference there. Obviously, if it was that on the chase track, it would bring a few more question marks of Galvin, but it should be quick enough to Galvin's liking, I'd say. And I think you'd be disappointed if he doesn't win here. But I just want to see some life from Mvoylan personally. I won't be having a bet in this race at all. I just want to see something. Like, it would be nice to see.
You're more likely
a bit
to
of
see
life back.
You're more likely to see something from him over 3 miles and 2 miles. I'll tell you that for sure.
Well, you'd think so. Like, it gives him some time to warm to his task, and we'll see what's left. But yeah, it's a race to watch for me, not to bet in.
Cool. Love that. People are going to be loving listening to that. All right.
If they want fake strong opinions, then there's other places to go.
The Elite Hurdle is going to be the last race we cover before we look at anything else for Saturday's action. I'm going to keep it really short and sweet. When the time arrives, lads, do not overthink it. So Royale is the bet. Winner of the race the past 2 seasons. He's a serial Grade 2 winner over both obstacles, and he's literally facing handicappers. I know he's got to be like 11 to 10 even money. Stick it in all your multiples. Enjoy. Sit back, feet up. It's an easy one, boys.
The betting masterclass.
Go on, Dan. Who are we going for here?
Hard
to disagree with me, isn't it?
No, well, yeah, odds against is actually all right as well, for all things considered. You should probably be a shade of odds on. I think you get 11 to 10 is readily available. But the only thing I'd say is the pace angle here is a bit of an interesting one. Obviously, you've got So Royale, Night Salute, and Milkwood, who all like to be played late. And obviously, that kind of gives Harry Cobden a bit of a free rein to give it a good go from the front on Nappers Hill. Obviously, we know he stays further. Obviously, won the silver trophy. Now, is that enough to make Nappers Hill a betting proposition at 9 to 4? Probably not really for me. It is something to consider for sure. But I just think we know that Soroya has an abundance of speed, even at his age, in these conditions, and probably more so than Nappers Hill. So I'm not going to vehemently disagree with you and argue with you. Whether I'd say put him in every single bet you're having on Saturday, I might not go that far.
Double him up with everything, mate.
Please note, Willow is not a financial advisor, or even a betting advisor, really.
No,
look, I'd be surprised if he's beaten, but another one of those where it's a bit of a middling race.
Jake, are you going to come and begrudgingly side with me and join the So Royale group, or are you going to be looking elsewhere?
Yeah, let's have another podcast now after the Pied Piper, shall we?
I just got to talk everyone down for putting in multiples. Don't big him back up.
No, as Dan said, it's not really a betting race. Nappers Hill still got £5 to find, even adjusting, for the weights. So I'm more than happy to. I've doubted him the last twice now. Nappers Hill, I've underestimated him both times. I'm more than happy to triple down on this. At some point, he's going to find his seating.
Definition of insanity.
Literally, yeah. But So Royale, I think, is just a much better horse. This is his prime conditions. Won it the last twice. Yeah, perfect. I think he wins.
We'll move on to anything else. Time wasn't on my side, so I haven't got anything else. But obviously, I've given you all a lovely 11 to 10 winner. Dan, I'm going to head to you for anything else.
Sure. So we'll go over a few rogue ones. It won't be a big betting weekend
for me personally. So I've gone for a couple of off-piste
ones. After all
those
winners last week.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to consolidate.
Like to give all the winners to other channels, do you, mate? Nice.
Pretty much. Yeah. That's my specialty.
That's how it looks, doesn't it?
Yeah. Hey, you're not wrong. Although I haven't been invited back on any of them this week, so there you go. Take from that what you will. So we'll go off a bit off piece. 253 at Kelso, currently not priced up. The expected price is 13-2. Probably won't be that, but a horse called Bray Hill. Now, he's a dual point-to-point winner. He beat Vorselay in one of those. So if you take that literally, considering he's about 4-6 for the Fox Hunters, it was a team at this stage. That's a pretty good performance. And some of his hurdle form reads pretty well as well. He beat a couple of low 120s horses in a maiden hurdle pretty comfortably. And he was probably going to beat a couple of horses rated in the high 120s under a penalty, under a recent start before running out in pretty weird style at the last. That was a very odd one. And before running well in a handicap for the first time, finally goes chasing here for the first time up to 3 miles, which looks very likely to suit. And based on some of that point form and even his hurdles form, a mark of 118 looks fairly lenient with Brian Hughes booked for the ride. And he's also a horse that beat Marble Sands on seasonal 1-yard debut before, so he can go well fresh. And
that's why you like him.
Absolutely, yeah. Anything that beats Marble Sands, then again, most horses beat Marble Sands, is a good horse in my book. And then we go on to the 318 Aintree, back into a more conventional race, the 2-mile handicap. Outside of the field currently, but I think that's probably unfair, and that's Seo. Now, if you go back to this race last year, he was second off a £5 higher mark, finished ahead of Gunsight Ridge. He's on £11 better terms with him this time around, and yet Seo is 15-2 and Gunsight Ridge is disputing favouritism. I just think that seems a bit off to me. Went very well fresh in this race last year. If you look at the form of his last run at Cartmel, that worked out extremely well. He was beaten just over a length by Clear the Runway, who was on a streak of wins and then one off £7 higher next time. Dr. Sanderson was second. He won his next 2. And yet Sale was dropped £1 for that run, which seems extremely generous handicapping. I know he's fairly exposed, but that still seems pretty lenient from the handicapper. And despite this being a small field, there's 3 potential front runners in here. And we know Sale's a pretty keen-going sort who likes to be held up. So I think that'll suit his run style. Yard could be in better form, which is a slight concern, but they are starting to have runners run a bit better. And I just thought 15-2 outside of the field, that looked too big to me.
Jake, I'll go to you for anything else on Saturday or even Friday.
Yeah, I'm starting off all mine Saturday actually, but starting off in the 12:40 at Wincanton. And Josh Dace is going to absolutely love this because I think Sabrina is going to win the Richard Barber Mares.
Yeah, it was so eye catching last time.
Yeah, exactly. So I was at Newton Abbot that day, and all she did all day was drift. She just drifted all day. She went out to an SP of 9-1. I think she was like 11-4, 3-1 in the morning, something like that. Anyway, but anyway, yeah, all the way out to 9-1. She ran an absolute cracker to finish second. She's put up £2 for that, so she's rated 115 now. Freddie Gingle rides again, so takes off £10. Like, I think this is. I know every year there's always a strong case for the Paul Nicholls mare to win this race. But I think this year he's actually going to do it with Sabrina, and 6-1 is very fair. So I'm happy to take that one. Another Paul Nicholls horse actually in the 101 random race time.
Sorry, are we talking
Aintree.
to Josh? What happened to Jake? This is an imposter.
I know. I don't normally get behind all the Paul ones, but Milan Bridge in the Potemps, I think, has got a cracking chance. Yeah, I think he's the only one who really, really wants to win this, to be honest. So you got Jericho Rock in there and Remastered, who are both probably just prepping for the Coral Gold Cup. Ashtown Lad's also in there. I imagine he's got a chase target coming up at some point, because I don't see why they would give up over fences with him yet. So that's 3 of them I've kind of ruled out. And then Flight Deck is also in there, and he's entered in the Stayers Handicap Hurdle at Haydock, which he placed in last year. So again, potentially just having a prep run. But Milan Bridge is rated 126. So if he wants to run in the Potemps final, he's going to have to win this. And what makes me think that they're trying to win it even more, I love this angle in Potemps qualifiers, is that they've got a claimer on. So they've got Tom Buckley on, taking off £3, who's actually ridden in the last twice anyway. So potentially that's just why he's on. But either way, I think off a mark of 126, Milan Bridge has got a great chance. And then the last one, just to mention, Rioja, one of my horses to follow for the season, runs in the 136, over 2.5 miles, first run after a wind-up. Yeah, decent race, but he's making his chase debut. And I think he should win that, to be honest. But yeah, he's one to keep an eye on.
Brilliant. Well, that's just going to about wrap up the podcast. I don't know if you boys have anything to plug. The only thing I wanted to mention was that our own Dan Overall has been nominated for the 2022 Emerging Talent Award, where he's facing such talents as Maddie Plough, Mark Boylan. Those are the only two I can remember off the top of my head.
Basically, the Racing Post employee list.
Yeah. How? Firstly, just tell us quickly how that made you feel and how much of a chance you think you have.
I was put like such a professional interviewer. How did that make you feel? No, it's an honor to be nominated. Obviously, it was kind of a bit of a shock considering I'm literally just a guy who generally chats about racing from his bedroom.
Chats bollocks.
You can literally see half of my bed in the screen, and yet somehow I'm amongst people who are paid professionally to do this for a living. So, look, it's nice to be nominated. It's been a pretty incredible year when I look back at what's happened and all of that. It's been pretty great. So this should be just a nice little top. I have no expectations of winning it, but I've heard it's a good night and a good day. So I will be indulging in everything that comes with that.
Fantastic stuff, mate. We're all rooting for you. I can assure you that. Anyway, guys, that just about wraps up the podcast. We do hope you enjoyed. If you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button, hit the like, join our Telegram, follow us on Twitter, all that good stuff. And we'll catch you next week for another video.